Hey number ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and today we're talking about Kendo, my personal experience with it, and the reason why I stopped practicing it. So yes, I used to practice Kendo, and I practiced it for about 3 years, give or take. And this was back when I was living in Japan, because I used to live in Japan. I spent about 4 years in Japan, and 3 of these 4 years I was practicing Kendo. So here's the thing. Back in Japan, when I was working there, I was working a full-time job, and which meant I didn't have much time to myself, and I only had a Tuesday free. So at one point, after settling in, working for a few months, I decided, you know what, I'm in Japan and I would like to practice martial arts. And what better place to select a Japanese martial art than Japan itself? So I decided, since when I was younger, like a teenager, I used to practice a style of karate. I thought, you know what, I'll look for a karate dojo where I can start practicing it. And the thing is that I did find a karate dojo. The style was Seido Kaikan. I went to the place. It was in this like massive athletic center in this town. So I went there and I met with the karate sensei. I participated into one lesson, but then he told me that the lessons were going to be on Wednesdays and Fridays, which is I really couldn't practice. So he said, well, if you've got free Tuesdays, then you could choose between judo and kendo, because you know these are the days on Tuesday they practice these. And I thought, you know what, Kendo could be fun. I mean, I've got nothing against judo, of course, but Kendo, you know, I thought this could be good for me. So I went back the following week and I started watching Kendo. After the first lesson, I thought to myself, you know what, I really want to practice it. So I told the sensei. He said, no, for now, just come and watch. Which I did, of course. You know, I didn't want to be disrespectful. It's a different culture. In the West, that would never happen. But in Japan, they still have, particularly with martial arts, they still have this setup whereby it's not really a business that they are selling you. It's more like you need to be accepted if you are, you know, a person. You kind of need to prove that you've got a real interest towards it, which I can respect. And therefore, I went there for about 2 months, just watching. Every Tuesday, I was there, early, punctual. I still remember the day when the sensei, I think his name was Kaneda, something like that, can't remember, he gave me a shinai and said, line up with the kids, which I did. And that's when my Kendo adventure of 3 years started. Now, did I enjoy it? Absolutely. I loved every Tuesday of it. You know, I was serious. I wanted to learn it. I wanted to go. All the lessons were in Japanese, which were no problem since I do speak the language. And there was a little readjustment there to learn a few specific words of Kendo, but at the end of the day, no big deal. But then again, at one point I decided to stop. Why did I stop, and why am I not practicing Kendo to this day? And should you practice Kendo? I think the reason why I started practicing Kendo was the wrong reason. And that's why I'd like to tell you, if you have been thinking maybe I should practice Kendo once this pandemic is over, I want to find a martial art to practice, should I do Kendo? And the answer could be yes or it could be no. And it really depends on what is motivating you towards looking for a Kendo dojo. And for me, it was my love for the samurai. So I started loving the samurai when I was a teenager and I was playing Bushido Blade games. My love for the samurai continued as I became a university student and I graduated in Japanese language and culture. And then, you know, playing lots of video games like Kengo and learning and studying the history of the samurai, and I even made a freaking channel out of it. Yes, all of these things were the reason why I was drawn into Kendo. And I think that that's the wrong reason. So if that's the reason why you want to practice Kendo, if it's because you love Japanese video games on the samurai, like the Samurai Do series, if it's because you like the history of the samurai perhaps, or maybe anime about the samurai, then maybe Kendo's not the right thing for you. The reason why you should practice Kendo is because you like Kendo, because Kendo is one thing and Japanese samurai are another thing. And oftentimes this is not 100% clear. Particularly if you watch documentaries that tell you, oh, this is the heritage of the samurai, but is it really? True, some of the techniques derive from samurai combat. No denying that. But Kendo is extremely modern. Kendo did not exist at the time of the samurai. I'd like to stress that. Kendo was developed as I want to say, half a sport, half a martial art. Now, I know that the Japanese out there will tell me, no, Kendo is Budo, it's not a sport. And I can agree to up to a certain extent. Sure, if you win a match in Kendo, you score a good men, you're not supposed to be like, yeah, like you would in like an Olympic Games, and sometimes they even do it in Judo, which is actually one of the first things my Kendo sensei told me. Don't do that, because this is a Budo, this is martial art, you respect your opponent. And even the way they teach you how to treat the shinai, which you basically treat as if it were a real katana, so with all the respect, you don't just smash it on the floor, you don't just stand like this on it. You learn a certain level of discipline, and all of this can be traced back to the samurai, absolutely. But the system itself is modern, and it is made with scoring points in mind. In fact, in Kendo you don't learn a whole lot of ways to block or parry. You learn a few, but the majority is focused on attack, attack, attack. And there are so many areas that you don't have to worry about protecting because they are not accepted targets. You will develop blind spots that a real samurai wouldn't have developed. The style, also the footwork, is completely different to the way the samurai fought. The footwork has your rear heel lifted, and they do that to be able to have the propulsion so that you can, when you lounge in the front with your men, which is really the main attack in Kendo. There are others, of course. You've got Do, the cuirass, if you will, and then you've got Kote to hit the hands. Well, sort of, it's like usually around here, the wrist, and then you've got the Tsuki, which is like thrust to the throat. They used to have thrust to the Mune, which is the bosom, if you will, but they removed that because it was penalizing people fighting in Jodan so much that nobody was fighting in Jodan, so the high stance anymore, and it was really starting to become boring, so they removed that, which I'm glad they did. But on the other hand, why are they so penalized? They are penalized people in Jodan because when you are in Jodan and you want to hit someone in the head, well, if you hit them here, in fact, some Kendoka literally do this when you attack, and you place a perfectly mortal wound to the neck, it doesn't count. So in Jodan, you need to be a little bit more precise, and you've got this area completely exposed to Tsuki, which is why they removed it. And I understand. But all of these things, the footwork is different, the moves are restricted, the areas that are considered valid targets are so small, and the guard positions are basically only Chudan, so the forward one pointing at the throat, and the Jodan, which is the highest stance. And yes, they've got Gedan, which is lower, but it's like this is Chudan, this is Gedan. It's like very, very small. You don't basically point the knee like you would in Kenjutsu, for example. There is no Waki anymore, if not in Kata. There is no Hasso for some reason, even though I think Hasso Kamae would be a great Kamae to fight for. And all the other stances that you find in many other styles that are more ancient, like Kenjutsu or Yaido, and even Yaido Seitei, which is modern, but it still has more guards than Kendo, is because they don't work as well with the system the way it's structured now, which rewards certain behaviors and it penalizes other behaviors, not on the base of an actual duel, but simply on the basis of its own rules or set of rules. So all of this to say, if you like the sport, if you just watch Kendo and you love it, if you like everything Japan related, then go ahead and practice Kendo, absolutely. But if you're doing it because of the samurai and samurai combat and the history of Japan, which is the reason why I was doing it, then I want to say don't do it, because there will be other styles that I think would be more pertinent, such as any really style of Kenjutsu. It can be Katori Shintoryu, it can be Itoryu, I don't know, you say it, but if you are interested in that aspect, then Kenjutsu is really where you want to go. And even Yaido itself is closer to something the samurai would have practiced, although it would be just a small portion of their repertoire, but it would still be closer to what the samurai did in the, say, Sengoku period than Kendo. Even the grip is different. So the only thing I think that Kendo has that it's doing it better than any Kenjutsu or Yaido style is the fact that it has actual combat. And that is something I know people hate me for it because I think this, but I still say it and I still think it. And therefore, if you do practice Yaido or you do practice Kenjutsu, then you should really spar with your friends at least, because you're not going to get any sparring in your dojo unless your style does it, which I believe some styles are starting to do, which is great, because you can do all the kata in the world, your opponent will never behave the way you had anticipated. And therefore I think all of this comes from this. It is our fascination for the katana. I love the katana. I owned a katana before I even knew how to grip it. And I think that that's the point. If you own a katana because of all the samurai movies and history and books you've read, or the video games you played, or the anime you watched, and you want to know how to hold this, you want to know how to swing this, then Kendo's not really the one you should be looking at, because a shinai is a completely different beast. It's longer, it handles differently, it has a different shape. Everything is different about the shinai compared to a katana. Now, some kendoka do know how to hold a katana, because if you're a high-level kendoka, then you start practicing kata with these. Although again, I do prefer the kenjutsu kata over any kendo kata, if I really have to. But that's beyond the point, it's just what I like. But I practiced kendo for 3 years and I never touched a katana. Instead, on the very first lesson of my Katori Shintoryu practice, the sensei gave me a yaito to practice and taught me how to do noto properly, which you really don't learn in kendo. And I love that. And also, another thing I disliked about kendo, although again, that might have just been a thing that has to do with my dojo, perhaps you won't experience that, but my favorite fighting stance is Jodan. So I like fighting with the sword high. Now, of course, you don't always assume that position. It's really reaction based. It depends on what your opponent does, really. In Kendo, my sensei told me, you're not really allowed to fight in Jodan until you reach first Dan. So you're gonna have a few years where you just fight in Chudan. I didn't like that. On the first day that I practiced Kenjutsu, they taught me all the stances. That's what I liked. So that's why I say, if this is what you like, you should go for Kenjutsu, but possibly pair it with something else. Now, some people might say, well, how about you practice Kenjutsu for all the stances and all the fights and whatnot, and all the moves, but then you also practice Kendo so you get sparring. And the problem I have with that is that you won't be able to use 80% of what you learn in Kenjutsu into Kendo, because the majority of the guards and the moves and the slices and the attacks and the parries that you will learn that come from a more ancient tradition are illegal in Kendo. So yeah, you can bring some of it, but much of your muscle memory that you are developing through Kenjutsu is going to be wasted in Kendo. So that's why I say Kendo is great, but Kendo is inner development. You should do Kendo because it's going to make you a better person. You should do Kendo because it's a physical and mental and, in a way, even spiritual activity. You shouldn't really do Kendo because you want to know how to hold a katana, or because you like the samurai, because if that's the reason, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And perhaps you should be looking at something more closely related to the samurai. Not to say that any Kenjutsu style to this day is going to be the same as the samurai would have fought in the Sengoku period. That's just not going to happen. Not even very traditional preservation-oriented styles such as Katori Shintoryu have everything the exact same way as it was back in the Sengoku Jidai, but they are a lot closer. And therefore, again, if you like Kendo, find a Kendo dojo, practice it for 20 years, master it, enjoy it. But if you are into the samurai, I think you should go for Kenjutsu, Yaido, even Yaijutsu, I mean, if you could find it. Usually it's taught in Kenjutsu styles, because that's probably what you're looking for. And that's just my personal suggestion. And if you have any questions or if you disagree, well, let me know in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, noble ones. Stay noble, and I will see you for my next video. Thank you very much for watching. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Saraba.